My name is Brittany. I'm 34 years old, and I spent 3 years being the perfect girlfriend, until I walked into a courtroom and realized I was the one on trial. I didn't file that lawsuit to cause drama. I filed it because she took everything from me. $80,000. Gone. My name was on that contract. My savings. My future. And she smiled at me across the dinner table every Sunday like nothing happened. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had recorded every single conversation. Every promise. Every lie. Sitting on my phone. Waiting. Daniel said I was crazy. His family went silent. And suddenly the woman who stole from me was the victim, and I was the monster. Before I tell you what actually happened, like this video, subscribe and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Because it gets so much worse. Let me take you back to when it all started. I met Daniel at a work conference in Chicago. He was confident, funny, well-dressed. We exchanged numbers. 3 weeks later we were inseparable. 6 months in, he introduced me to his mother, Margaret. She hugged me at the door like she'd known me for years. Made dinner. Poured wine. Asked about my job, my family, my goals. Thought, this is it. This is what a real family feels like. I grew up without much. Single mother. Tight budget. I worked hard for everything I had. So when Margaret started showing interest in my financial background, asking smart questions, nodding at my answers, I felt seen. Respected. Like she genuinely believed in me. Daniel never warned me about her. Not once. By month 8, Margaret suggested we talk privately. No Daniel. Just us. She said she had an opportunity. Something quiet. Something profitable. She called it a sure thing. I should have asked why she needed me for a sure thing. But I didn't. I said yes. Margaret laid it out over coffee. A property investment. A duplex in Ohio. She'd found the listing, done the research, knew the seller personally. All she needed was a co-investor to split the cost and split the profit. Clean. Simple. Legal. She slid a folder across the table. Photos of the property. Projected returns. A timeline. It looked professional. It looked real. I took the folder home and read every page twice. I called my financial advisor. She said the numbers looked reasonable. I called Daniel. He said his mother had done deals like this before. Always came out ahead. That was enough for me. 2 weeks later I wired $80,000 into a joint account Margaret had already opened. My name was on it. Or so she told me. I never verified that myself. Margaret moved fast after that. Paperwork filed. Seller contacted. Timeline set. She updated me every few days. Sent messages. Shared documents. Everything felt legitimate. Then the updates slowed down. Then they stopped. Then Daniel started avoiding my questions. I gave it 2 weeks. Told myself she was busy. Told myself deals take time. But something kept pulling at me. A feeling I couldn't name. I logged into the joint account online. My access was denied. I tried again. Same result. I called the bank directly. The representative paused. Then told me my name was not listed on that account. Never had been. I sat completely still for about 30 seconds. Then I called Margaret. Straight to voicemail. Called Daniel. He picked up, sounded distracted, said I was probably misreading the paperwork. Said he'd look into it. Never called back. I drove to the bank in person the next morning. Brought every document Margaret had given me. The banker reviewed them quietly. Then looked up and told me 2 of the 3 documents had no official record in their system. I asked her to repeat that. She did. I walked out of that bank and sat in my car for a long time. Hands on the wheel. Engine off. $80,000. Gone. And nobody was answering their phone. I hired an attorney that same week. A woman named Carol. Sharp, no nonsense, had handled financial fraud cases for 15 years. I laid everything on the table. The documents. The bank visit. The ignored calls. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, we file immediately. The lawsuit named Margaret directly. Fraud. Misrepresentation. Unauthorized use of funds. Carol filed on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon Margaret had been formally served. Daniel called me that night. He wasn't distracted this time. He was furious. Said I had humiliated his family. Said his mother was devastated. Said I had misunderstood the entire arrangement, and that pulling lawyers into it made me look unstable. I let him finish. Then I told him I had recordings. He went quiet. I had been recording our conversations for 6 weeks at that point. Every phone call where Margaret referenced the investment. Every reassurance Daniel gave me. Every promise. Stored. Dated. Backed up. Daniel hung up. Margaret's attorney contacted Carol the following Monday. Suddenly everyone was available to talk. Suddenly everyone remembered everything differently. Margaret's attorney was a man named Richard. Expensive suit. Slow talker. The kind of man who made every sentence sound like a favor. He sent over a counterproposal within days. No admission of wrongdoing. A partial refund. A signed agreement that I would drop everything and never speak about it publicly. Carol slid it across to me without a word. Pushed it back. We were going to court. Richard's next move was a full financial disclosure request. Standard procedure, he called it. He wanted my complete financial history. Bank statements. Tax returns. Employment records. 3 years back. Carol said it was a pressure tactic. Designed to make me feel exposed. Designed to make me settle. I had nothing to hide. I submitted everything within 10 days. But then Richard requested something unexpected. He asked for records tied to a previous address I had listed. A city I had lived in before Chicago. Before Daniel. Before any of this. Carol looked at me carefully when she told me. I felt my stomach drop. Not because I was guilty. Because I knew exactly what that address connected to. 4 years before I met Daniel, I lived in Cincinnati. I was 29. Working in real estate administration. I had a boyfriend then too. His name was Marcus. We dated for 2 years. It ended badly. Not because of cheating. Not because of distance. Because Marcus accused me of stealing from him. He was wrong. But he filed a police report anyway. The investigation went nowhere. No charges. No conviction. Case closed. I moved to Chicago 8 months later and never looked back. But Richard had found it. He submitted that police report to the court as a character exhibit. No conviction. No charges. Just the report. Just my name. Just the accusation. Carol fought it immediately. Called it irrelevant. Called it prejudicial. The judge allowed it anyway. I watched the energy in that room shift the moment it was submitted. Margaret sat straighter. Daniel's relatives who had shown up to support her started whispering. And suddenly I wasn't the woman who had been defrauded anymore. Suddenly I was the woman with a history. Suddenly the entire case had a different flavor. Richard knew exactly what he was doing. Carol requested a recess. We stepped into the hallway. She spoke quietly but her eyes were serious. She told me Richard was building a narrative. That the police report was just the opening move. That there was likely more coming. I asked her how much more. She didn't answer directly. That night I went home and pulled out every document from my Cincinnati years. Lease agreements. Bank statements. Emails between me and Marcus. I read through everything until 2 a.m. Looking for anything Richard could twist. I found something I had forgotten about. A joint account. Me and Marcus. Opened in 2018. Closed 6 months later when we separated. Nothing unusual. Legitimate. But the closing balance showed a withdrawal I had made 3 days before we officially broke up. It was my money. My direct deposit had been going into that account for months. I withdrew what was mine. But on paper it looked like I had emptied a joint account right before a breakup. I called Carol first thing in the morning. She was already awake. She had already seen it. Richard had subpoenaed those records the day before. Richard presented the Cincinnati account records on a Tuesday. Made it sound deliberate. Calculated. He stood in front of that courtroom and painted a picture of a woman who had a pattern. A woman who got close to people. Got access to their finances. Then disappeared. The room was silent. Carol objected 3 times. Was overruled twice. I sat completely still. Hands flat on the table. Because the moment I reacted, the moment I showed anger or panic, I became exactly what he was describing. But here is what Richard didn't know. Marcus had contacted me 6 weeks before the trial. Out of nowhere. A text message. Said he had heard about my case against Margaret. Said he felt guilty about the police report. Said he wanted to make it right. I had that text message. I had his follow-up message where he explicitly stated the accusation had been made out of anger and had no factual basis. Carol submitted both messages into evidence that same afternoon. Then she called Marcus as a surprise witness. He flew in from Cincinnati. He took the stand. And he told the truth. Richard's entire narrative collapsed in 40 minutes. Marcus was calm on that stand. Clear. Direct. He told the court the police report was filed in anger. That nothing had ever been proven. That I had never taken anything that wasn't mine. That he regretted filing it. Richard cross-examined him for 20 minutes. Got nowhere. But that wasn't the moment that changed everything. The moment that changed everything was when Carol called Daniel. He hadn't expected that. Neither had Margaret. I watched her reach across and grab his arm as he stood up. He pulled away gently, walked to the stand without looking at her. Carol started simple. Asked how long we had dated. Asked when he introduced me to Margaret. Asked whose idea the investment was. Daniel paused on that last question. Richard objected. Judge overruled. Daniel answered quietly. He said it was his mother's idea. That she had approached him first. That she had specifically asked him to bring it up casually with me so it didn't feel like a sales pitch. The courtroom shifted. Margaret's face didn't move. Carol asked Daniel if he had seen the joint account documents before I signed anything. He said yes. She asked if my name was on them at that time. He looked down. He said no. The courtroom didn't erupt. No gasps. No dramatic outburst. Just a long heavy silence that felt louder than anything. Carol let it sit. Then she submitted the original joint account documents. The ones Margaret had shown me before I wired the money. Side by side with the actual account records from the bank. 2 different documents. Same header. Different names. Different account numbers. Margaret had created a duplicate. A fraudulent copy. Designed to look legitimate. Designed to show my name where my name had never actually been. Richard stood up. Started to object. The judge held up one hand and stopped him. The judge reviewed both documents herself. Quietly. Carefully. She asked the court clerk to log them both as primary evidence. Then the judge requested Margaret's full financial records. Not just for this case. Everything. 3 years back. Richard asked for a delay. Was denied. What came back 3 days later was worse than anything I had anticipated. Margaret had done this before. Not with me. Not with a girlfriend. With her own sister. 7 years ago. A different property. A different amount. Same method. Same duplicate documents. That case had been settled privately. Sealed. Until now. The judge reconvened on a Thursday morning. The room was fuller than it had been all week. Word had gotten out somehow. Margaret arrived with Richard and 2 additional attorneys I had never seen before. That told me everything. The judge didn't waste time. She ruled in my favor on all 3 counts. Fraud. Misrepresentation. Unauthorized use of funds. Full restitution of $80,000 plus legal fees. Plus interest. Margaret sat completely still when it was read out. Daniel was not sitting beside her. He had moved out of her house 2 weeks into the trial. Quietly. No announcement. Just gone. But Carol wasn't finished. She filed a countersuit the same afternoon. Civil fraud. Damages. Emotional distress. The sealed case involving Margaret's sister had been flagged by the court and forwarded to the state attorney's office for separate review. Margaret's additional attorneys were not there for this case. They were there for what was coming next. Richard requested a recess. The judge denied it. I watched Margaret whisper something to the man beside her. He shook his head slowly. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. Because Carol leaned over and told me quietly. The state attorney had already opened a criminal investigation that morning. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The criminal investigation took 11 months. I wasn't called to testify again. Carol handled everything. But I followed every update. Every filing. Every court date. I had earned that right. Margaret was formally charged 8 months in. Wire fraud. Document forgery. Financial exploitation. The sister came forward publicly for the first time. Then a third woman appeared. Someone nobody had mentioned before. A former business partner from 6 years ago. Same pattern. Same documents. Same silence afterward. Margaret had been doing this for over a decade. Richard withdrew as her attorney 2 weeks before the criminal trial began. The verdict came on a quiet Wednesday morning. Carol called me before I could check my phone. Guilty. On all primary counts. Sentencing scheduled for 60 days out. I sat on my kitchen floor when I hung up. Daniel texted me that evening. No apology. Just 3 words. I believe you. I didn't respond. The money had already been returned. Every dollar. But that wasn't what I had spent 11 months fighting for. I filed that lawsuit because I refused to be the woman that story got told about without her own voice. And right now you just heard my voice. If this story hit different, you know what to do. Share it. Someone needs to hear this.